Excellent. All right, and we're going to go live in 3, 2, 1. Excellent. All right. Well, welcome back to another great week of Account-Based Friday. It's been a couple weeks since Megan and I have got together. We gave everybody off the holiday last week, and it's end of quarter, fresh quarter. We got a great guest today, Rebecca, who is a former colleague of Megan's. We'll give a formal introduction in a moment. She's head of marketing over at Ian's, but with that, every week we do the same type of approach. We start off with a weekly poll. And our weekly poll this week, we ask a question about about where companies get their information when they come to making MarTech decisions or sales tech decisions. And certainly, given Rebecca's past of being a colleague with Megan at Sirius, you both of you probably have sharp points of view on this. But just a little bit of context as to why I created this poll this week. I had run into a prospecting situation where the prospect was taking at face value what the vendor was presenting, and it was really incorrect information. It took them a while, but they ended up consulting not just with an outside agency, which was us, but they talked with their peers, and they eventually overturned the decision that a vendor was sharing an opinion on. So I thought that was interesting, but across the board, I was hoping that agencies/consultants would rule the day, but really peers are where it's at. So I don't know, Megan, Rebecca, you guys have had a lot of experience here. Any points of view?
I'll jump in and then turn it over to Rebecca. But
Sure.
I mean, this is 100% in line with 8 years of data from the buying study that we used to do at Sirius. And I believe there's still some great data from that coming out of Forrester now. But every time we ask the question, what was the main driver of the reason you chose the vendor you chose? If you added up the answers, it was 80% higher than this even at that time, but this was pre-COVID. 80% was my direct experience with the vendor or what I heard about from other people about their experience with the vendor. And in the end, I mean, especially now, I think because of so much misinformation out there in a range of areas, I think we really do, for better or for worse, rely on our peers. And I think your point's well taken, though, John, is that sometimes your peer group may not have full information. So it's a reminder to all of us to be careful about making sure that we are consulting with third parties as well as with our own networks, depending on the magnitude of the decision. I know right now I'm going through a process to make a decision about a couple of services providers, and I am relying on my peers, but I'm also realizing in one particular case, I am going to need some outside advice because I don't know enough about the topic, nor does anyone else in the immediate team. So we're going to have to get some outside help. So I would just remind people, like, peers are great and 100%, to be listened to and trusted, but make sure that you are not, you're not shutting yourself out, especially if you already have access to some of the great advisory services out there, Rebecca's company included, before you make those decisions. And with that, though, Rebecca, what are your thoughts? And congratulations on your new role at Ian. Super excited to have you join us today.
Yes, thanks, Megan and John, for having me. Yes, I think when I looked at this, I said, okay, all three are important, right? I think peers, yep. You might start there to say, okay, what are you using? But I think if you're doing your due diligence and you've got a short list of vendors and you're evaluating them in a similar way, like you're asking the same questions, you're validating on the same sort of features and benefits, and then leveraging the external resource, a separate third party that can help you think of those areas where you may not have gotten the feedback from your peer community and or the objectivity you may have been looking for even through vendors. I think, yeah, they're trying to be as objective as they can, but obviously we're trying to solve a solution here. So I think it's a combination of all three. But I think you're going to tap into that network. Whether or not it's first, you're definitely gonna tap into the network and figure out what people have used in previous jobs, right? And then start there. So maybe that can help shape your short list. And then once you fine tune, I think the consultants and the vendors can help round it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great take, Rebecca. And For folks joining, fun fact, Rebecca, John, and I all share, we're all alumni of the University of Connecticut. So for anyone listening, please cheer on our amazing women's basketball team in their Final Four bid today. They're out in Minnesota for that. So yay, go UConn.
Go Huskies.
And another fun fact, Rebecca and I worked together for many, many years at Sirius Decisions. Rebecca, you led marketing operations for Sirius Decisions, which I remember when we had Jay Gaines on, he reminded us that when he took over as CMO there, it was a couple of his peers said, wow, it must be like being the chef at culinary school, in the cafeteria, like everybody's going to be judging your work and giving you input. And I think though it also set you up for your current role as marketing leader. I'd love to hear a little bit about what it was like kind of, and what is different about a broader marketing leadership role versus a marketing operations leader role.
Right. So some of my background is I wasn't always in marketing ops. I had some varied roles, some in the demand gen side, and then sort of leading events, but then pivoted to an ops focus to really understand the impact marketing was beginning to have. So taking that and then shifting, sort of pivoting back to more general marketing leadership role, I think lends itself nicely because I understand now the mechanics of how we get to the impact, right? So I understand how to look at the return on the investment of marketing and sort of behind the curtain what goes into actually helping us get there. So I think coming from that vantage point, we can ensure that we can be more data driven in how we actually look at those motions we're using to help us drive that demand or drive that growth.
Yeah, I imagine too, the people you work with appreciate that perspective, because I think sometimes you've got, marketing leaders who want all this amazing reporting and all these incredible insights. And what they may not appreciate is just exactly how hard it is to make that stuff happen sometimes. So knowing what's going on behind the curtain, I think is a good way to build credibility with a new team too, I would think.
Yes, definitely. I think it was interesting when I first came on board, getting to know the different parts of the organization and different teams, and certainly working closely with my sales counterpart. But when we started to have conversations about, well, how do we get to the measurement? And we start talking about Salesforce, having a conversation with our tech leader there on the Salesforce side was, oh my gosh, you sort of actually get this. So it was nice, for better or worse on their part. I come with a bit of knowledge, which is sometimes helpful.
I'm sure that it is. Well, and kind of on that note, how are you making choices about what you're focusing your measurement on, especially, as a new leader coming in, you want to be able to build credibility for your function and yourself really too. What are your thoughts on that? What kinds of things are you really focused on from a business growth perspective and from a measurement perspective?
Yeah. So I think about, obviously we want marketing's goals are the company's goals, our sales goals, right? So I think if we think about how is marketing impacting enterprise value and growth, that's sort of the vantage point I'm coming from. And then, so what do I need to present up to executive and the board about that impact? And then what does the team need to actually understand what levers to pull? So if I think about growth, how are we hoping to, what is the lift marketing's having on subscription growth? So IONS is a subscription-based recurring revenue model, so like a SaaS model. So what is our lift on that subscription growth, which is the key driver for us? And then ultimately, so what is marketing's contribution? So we will take a look at, well, what does our demand waterfall or funnel math actually look like? So what is marketing's contribution there, whether you're looking at influence or true source attribution? And we're looking at a bit of both. So, but we're looking at, we'll say attribution right now with looking at the MQLs and sort of the leads that are being created, but really beginning to understand how that is making its way through the qualification stages. So if I look at, keep at the high level, so what is the ultimate lift marketing's efforts are having on enterprise value? And the way I would view that is through our contribution to not only pipeline, but then new logo acquisition there. So, and then what are those metrics that we're using? I like to think of it as the 3Vs, CR, and then deal size. So the 3Vs are the volume, the velocity, and the value, and then the conversion rates through the movement of that demand through whatever sort of funnel mechanism you have in place. And then looking at deal size. So if marketing's efforts are doing the right things, we should see an incremental lift in sort of the deal size that comes through. I think my experience in having put these mechanisms in place and these measurements and infrastructure in place at both Sirius Decisions and standing it up at Forrester, we can definitely see from, you know, some of that attribution standpoint, and it doesn't 100% account for that. We know that there's some flaws in an attribution model. But I think what we can see as a baseline is that when marketing touches something, when marketing's efforts actually move that demand through the process, we can see that deals tend to move faster. They tend to convert at higher rates and at higher average deal size. So the hope is that we'll see those same things where I am now, and I think we are starting to see some of that. So it's good with the infrastructure that the team has put in place that we're able to actually see that. And then I think it gives us the opportunity to start to figure out how to double down and what areas to double down in. But again, that starts with, do you have the right infrastructure in place to understand those campaign mechanisms and the levers you can pull there? So what fields do you have to track the types of campaigns you're trying to run, and what are those UTM parameters, and how does that feed in? And then ultimately, that's at the functional level where we say, what levers do we need to pull to then ultimately roll that demand back up, and where do we double down how we drive that through.
Got some unique experience there, Rebecca, with, you know, the Sirius side of things and now at Ions. And it sounds to me, and, you know, I'd be curious to get your viewpoints about what's the same and what's different between Sirius and Ions. It sounds like the Ions model is a little bit more end user driven in terms of your measurement focus approach, whereas maybe, I'm guessing here, but Sirius, I would think it sounds to me like maybe your buyer group is a little bit larger, and maybe there's a little bit of a like a new logo acquisition might be a little bit different there than the Ions model. But I'm guessing here, you like maybe you could share, what do you see as the similarities and differences between those two models? And the reason I ask that is it seems like everybody's measurement model in my experience differs, and so it's really important to kind of learn what's working and what's not working, because everybody's model is, you know, a little bit different.
Sure. So I think the one of the key differences with coming from Sirius Decisions in Forrester is the types of personas we're targeting. I think at that level, where I am at Ions, we have we'll call it 4 core personas, but they ultimately roll up to the top, our security leader. So it's basically parts of the team that actually funnel up to our security leader. So they are our primary decision maker, that, and in some cases the CIO. I think on the other side at Forrester and Sirius Decisions, we had more varied buyers across the different parts of the organization. So I think that is a key difference between where I came from and where I am. And what does that mean for our go-to-market motion? It means that we've got, ultimately we want to help sales get to that decision maker, but our entry point may be a little different. It may be down a click or two to the team, not unlike what you might see at Sirius or a Forrester, in that the CMO or the head of sales, you might go to the sales ops leader, you might look at some aspect of marketing ops and or the head of demand gen, where they may have some budget for a service like that, but it may be the CMO that is the ultimate decision maker or budget holder. So not unlike my previous companies, but I think the buyer we're looking for is a bit more focused.
Yeah, that definitely changes, how you think about your measurement too. And the more complex your go-to-market, I think the more things you need to pay attention to, or at least the more you've got to sort of divide up how you're looking at things. I guess maybe that's the way to look at it. But one of the things we've talked about is the sort of the focus of marketing and what kind of falls under marketing span of control and what things are kind of outside of it that you wouldn't want to have to worry about being goaled on or measured on. What are the things that you're really focused on now in terms of business goals? And, any advice for people sort of thinking about how do we make sure to focus marketing on the right things and not the wrong, and not try to say we're going to contribute to things we can't really support?
Right. So I think for us right now, what is within our control. So I think if we think about what's within our control, it's those things we own, or we have really a clear line of sight on. So let's double down there. So let's, is your website optimized to convert leads, right? So if it's not, what do we need to do there? Let's focus there first, because if that's really the entry point to the brand and getting to know the value we offer, then I think we have to focus some effort there. And then I think if we take a look at the next lever, what can we do through our networks to help amplify and engage our audience through that channel? So I think my first is, what can we do on those areas of the journey that we own? And then what can we do on those areas of the journey where we can help amplify or improve engagement? And then lastly, although this is sort of like a focus area for us too, what can we do through our external channels, right? What are those third-party channels? What are those watering holes where our audience is that we need to be? So I think a big task for us this year is figuring out, what are the right places to be, and then learning fast and then doubling down on those areas. So those are our key focus areas. But I think for us, it's like, let's make the investment of time and effort in making sure that what we have control of, which is what we own, is optimized and fully maximized to the best that it can be. And where did we start? So, search engine optimization. So is our infrastructure set up correctly? Is it supporting our ability to be able to track and then convert? So do we have the right structure to build content, right? So I think those things are within our control. And if we can focus there, then it makes the other parts easier.
Yeah,
there's
for sure.
definitely pros and cons on the measurement side of things, of where to measure, whether you measure it in your CRM system, outside of your CRM system. Then there's technical limitations. I know typically we prefer, or we advocate, to measure everything in Salesforce, because it just has that perception of a single source of truth. And the moment you pull it out of Salesforce, even though it's the same exact information, people start questioning its veracity. If you're at liberty to share, and if you're not, maybe you could share kind of conceptually at a high level how you do things. But how are you measuring? Like what kind of systems are you using? Is it primarily marketing automation and CRM, or like is there any special sauce, extra systems that you're using outside of that?
I would say our tech stack is fairly typical. So we have a marketing automation platform, we have CRM, sales lives and breathes CRM. We have Tableau is our sort of business intelligence layer. So we do sort of pull out of these other point systems into Tableau. Tableau being part of our Salesforce. We use salesforce.com. That's our CRM, part of the product family there. We have a content management system, a social app, and then some workflow and web analytics. I think what we're looking to do is be able to pull in what we can into our CRM as a source of truth, but there we have, I think, more ability to visualize that data through something like a Tableau, and be able sort of share that out. So that's what we use. That's our stack. And I would say between Salesforce and Tableau, those are our single sources of truth, but we may be viewing some of our sort of our activity metrics within our point systems, but anything we're sort of sharing across the organization is going to come into Salesforce and then up through Tableau, or some connection up through Tableau.
Did you come in with that infrastructure in place, or have you had to add things? And did your team have the skills to use them?
I would say I'm lucky in that we've got a really skilled BI team and tech team, and sort of like our Salesforce admin. So they know their stuff. So I was lucky to have that. I think what we are fine tuning, I'll say, is some of these other data elements. So one of the things we want to do is improve how we message. So do we have a line of sight into our efficacy there, and how that is driving conversions? So some of that data isn't where we need it to be. So that is a work in progress with members of the MAP team as well as the CRM team to help us get there and get a clearer line of sight of some of that activity level data that will help the team figure out those levers to pull. So no, it wasn't completely set, but we had a really strong foundation.
Yeah, that's amazing. But I really want to hear more about how you're thinking about measuring the efficacy of your measurement, or pardon me, of your messaging. That's a big one and it's hard. Tell me how you're thinking about that.
It is. So I think part of what we're doing right now is really building out the persona, doing some persona development work, which I think will help us fine tune our messaging. But I think what we'll do is, one, it's through content. So what are those offers we're putting out there? How are we crafting what that message says? So are we sort of hitting on the key themes or priorities that our security leaders have over the sort of the horizon of 1 to 3 years? Like, what's immediate this year, what's on the horizon over the next couple of years, and then understanding what those top topics are. So understanding the keywords that are resonating today, and then sort of doubling down in those areas to create content, and then taking some tests, doing some testing on, you know, what sort of message works. So doing a little bit A/B testing there on what's resonating, what's gonna drive those conversions for us.
Yeah, I feel like testing is one of those things. It's like not enough people do it. It makes such a difference, though.
I think it does. And I mean, you need the scale to really do some multivariate testing, but I think A/B testing works really well, and it's something that you can learn quickly and course correct too. So
yeah, I'd imagine your A/B testing is pretty critical for the type of measurement that you do, because you're so interested in the end user acquisition. So the A/B
right.
side is
Mhm.
probably a premium if you're able to do that.
Right.
That makes sense. I just wanted to see if any of the audience members, whether you're on chat or if you want to come on, either way, if you have any questions about measurement, or any thoughts, or look at Joe, just looks like he's in a warm area.
Hey, Rebecca, I have a question related to the measurement of engagement versus actual conversion. So especially when you're talking about ABM and long sales cycles, you may not see a conversion for 6 months to a year.
Right.
So how do you approach getting the signals of engagement that may later turn into a conversion?
So I think in that approach, you can look at lift, right? So I think if you've got your campaigns running and you've got individuals associated with accounts, and those individuals are engaging with what you're putting out there through your marketing motions, and you have a way to track that in the system, and there's other opportunities being created within those accounts, I think you can start to measure the lift on the value that's associated with those opportunities. I think there you can start to see whether or not the motions you have running are impacting the size of those deals. I think that's one way you can take a look at it. And then the longer end of it, if what you've passed, if you're doing a sort of like a buying group demand unit sort of play there, when that opportunity actually makes its way, obviously you can understand the size of that, the deal size there as well. I think it goes back to one of my core metrics, which is really the deal size. That helps us, understand marketing's impact overall. Hopefully
really
that answered
cool.
your question.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So it's like you may be able to see some measurement and a lift on engagement within an account or within specific people within the account. And then ultimately, once they cross into the opportunity stage, then it's like, oh, we can look back and see how engaged they were leading up to becoming an opportunity.
Yeah, I think the qualifier there is, if you're going to look at the lift, we have to understand what the control set is too. So those that have been touched by marketing versus those that haven't. So I think that's where you're going to understand your lift. Yeah. And your impact.
Very awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Rebecca.
You bet.
Yeah, that was a great question, Joe. Thank you. I think that's one where, especially in long sales cycle scenarios, it does start to be harder, especially if you're kicking off a new marketing program and, well, we're not going to see revenue from this for a year in a best case scenario. That's hard. So how do you have those breadcrumbs that tell you you're tracking, in the right direction and that the marketing's bringing something to the table? I like that a lot. Thank you for asking. All right. Well, I know we're coming up on time. Rebecca, thank you so very much for joining us today and for sharing your insights. I can't think of anyone better to talk about marketing measurement. You've done a tremendous job throughout your career on that. Yay, Joe's applauding as well. Yeah, this is the hard stuff. And no surprise, we saw a lot of interest in this topic leading into today, because I think all of us are trying to figure it out. John, any last questions or thoughts for Rebecca before we send everybody back?
No, this is great conversation. I really appreciate you coming out, Rebecca. And I think your unique experience there coming from Sirius to now Ian's definitely have experienced the leverage in both of those scenarios from a measurement perspective. So no, it's been great. And next week we have Matt Hines will be joining us to talk all things community. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Megan and John. I appreciate it. It was nice to meet you, Joe.
Awesome.